the teacher, or and when we say guru in this tradition, when we talk about Guru Purnima, it was really celebrating, you know, not your English teacher or your math teacher or your music teacher or your dance teacher, but it was celebrating spiritual teachers of a very high level. And I you know, like everything, I kind of like know what I'm talking about when it hits me. And when Bobby said, "What are we talking about?" I last night I thought, well, let's talk about Guru Purnima, and also just the concept of guru. Like, does it really work for Westerners? Does it really work for within our psyche? There's been so much talk about colonization and appropriation of yoga and yogic ideas. And while we use this word guru all the time in traditions like Jivamukti or Iyengar or Ashtanga, I'm sorry, I wish Tammy were here, because I know that in Kundalini the word is used a lot. It's one of those kind of concepts that on its highest level, you have to kind of question if it can really be used properly if you're from Western culture, if you were raised here and with that Western psychology of the individual. And then at the same time, you know, there's a lot of things to look at within the idea of the guru concept, that maybe there's some really good stuff that Westerners can use for it and apply to their practices to deepen their practice. So originally, when we look at the word guru, gu means darkness, and ru is sometimes translated as the dispeller of darkness, or a dispeller. But in reality, ru means light. So gu means darkness, ru means light. How do you dispel darkness? You put light upon it, or you turn a light on in a dark room. So that's how you get that translation of dispeller of. In reality, so guru literally means light and dark, you know. And in that idea of light and dark, it's very interesting. I was online, and somebody, you know, dealing with where we are politically right now, somebody said, "Oh, that's such a racial comment, a racially charged concept or idea of dark and light, and that, you know, darkness is seen as negative and light is seen as like something better." And I read a lot of like what people were writing, and I thought what's being missed here is actually the context of the situation, that the words or the ideas of darkness and light are not physical here, but they're metaphysical. And they're beyond the material world. That's what we're talking about here. So we're a lot right now, even within Western culture, the word guru is being applied to political and social change. And that in itself is a kind of cultural appropriation. That in itself is kind of appropriating a word that's not really in the English language, and then saying, oh, it's about what's happening in current events. And then we kind of miss the point of, like, you know, what is a guru and how does a guru work and why are they dispelling darkness? In a lot of ways, a guru is not really the object of light or dark. Like, that's a big, huge misunderstanding also in Western culture. And because of the misunderstanding, probably both in India and in the West, it's very easy for what's called a Svengali, or a somebody who wants to control you, manipulate you, to say they're the guru, and then have everybody follow them and quote unquote worship them. And that, in fact, what the Dalai Lama says is that anybody who's a real guru would actually shy away from the idea of somebody worshiping them, because everything that they would know as an enlightened being would tell them that the body and the mind that they have can't be the object of worship. So Guru Purnima was really a kind of a time when you were actually just to kind of be able to thank the guru for the teachings. And this celebration that happens tonight came in 3 different forms. One was that all of the teachers in a given area maybe would get together and give diction to a group of people. They would like say, okay, well, today we're going to celebrate, and everybody's going to come together, and all the teachers are going to come together as a group, and we're going to give a discourse, and and this is our gift to you. The second would be like where a single group of people, like maybe followers of one teacher, would get together, and he would give a discourse, or she would give a discourse, but then there would be like gifts given to the guru, right? And basically that was payment for their teachings. But it was also understood that, like, you should only give what you are capable of giving. So if you were somebody of lesser means, you would give what you could give, and somebody of a lot of means would would give more. But it was also kind of done in secret, so nobody knew what one was giving. The final Guru Purnima was when a teacher had private students, and private students have always been seen as different within the system. Private students, the guru at that point, when you came to a teacher and you said, can you teach me in private? The guru was always able to say, yes, and my price for that per hour is, right? That was because it was a one-on-one thing. It was not to a mass of people. So when we come to this idea of how is the guru supposed to be approached, last night during Guru Purnima with Yogeshri described it in a very beautiful way. He said, Gu and Ru is darkness and light. He said, but the guru is like the moon in the darkest of night, a full moon, because it always happens on the full moon. And he said, there's very specific spiritual language and symbolism connected to the fact that this celebration always happens on the full moon. He said, the guru is like the moon in the night sky. And he said, we have to accept and know that we all know that the moon is actually a dark place. The moon has no capability of creating light. It is actually the light of the sun that is reflecting on the moon that allows us to see the moon. And he went on to say that in any kind of guru situation, the understanding really is it's not the guru that is the object of worship, but it is always the absolute and the energy of the sun. That God is the true focus, even within what has been misunderstood as guru culture. That the guru is just somebody who has studied and learned and has mastered these sadhanas, and then they're willing to pass them on as a teacher. And so that is one way of looking at the guru. The other way is to really look at it through the idea of Western psyche and the Western mind. I did some research and I wanted to see what Joseph Campbell, does everybody know who Joseph Campbell is? Joseph Campbell wrote about mythology, and he taught at Columbia, and he was a wonderful, uh, uh, really explaining how different cultures are similar and how sometimes they're saying the same things. And he was also really good at kind of saying these two things have, like, they're so far apart from each other, there's no way to really show that there's a similarity. And actually, it's very interesting because guru culture was the one thing that Joseph Campbell said that there is nothing within Western psyche. And when he said Western psyche, he meant anything that came out of Judeo-Christian or Roman Greek world, any kind of mythology from those lineages. And so, yes, he is considering the Middle East part of the Western mind instead of the Oriental or the Asian concepts of spirituality. And he said that when in an article, an interview he did a few years before he died, somebody asked him about, a yoga teacher asked him about, how do you feel about gurus? And he said, gurus are the most dangerous things to Westerners that one can imagine. And the interviewer said, why? And he said, well, the other day I was reading The Search for the Holy Grail, the original one in French, right? And he said, the language is very interesting. He said, Campbell went on to describe the text, and he said, King Arthur calls his knights to the round table, but before he serves the feast, he has them like sit and meditate for a moment and think, and what appears is the Holy Grail in the middle of the table that has been brought down by angels from heaven, and the Grail is covered. You can't see the Grail. And he said, and this vision is supposed to be this vision of the ultimate truth and light and purity. And then the vision disappears. And Galahad stands up and he says, we will all find this Grail. This is our mission, to now search for the Holy Grail. And that by finding the Holy Grail, we will bring enlightenment to humanity. So they all agreed to this journey. The following day, the description of all of the knights of the round table going out looking for the Holy Grail is that they meet in the castle and they agree to wait for each person to go in the woods alone, on their own, so they are not humiliated by going in a group. That they have to go into the forest to search for enlightenment as individuals. And he says, and he proceeds to say that then each knight goes their separate ways on the search of this Holy Grail. And he said, this alone, this ancient folk tale is so rooted in the Western psyche that the individual is so important, that what guru culture does is it says that you are actually putting all of your sense of being into one person. And that for this to take place, the group has to become one and focus on the teachings of one single person. And that once the one single person has the Holy Grail, and they can give it to you or not give it to you. And he said, this is a huge conflict within the American mind of the lone wolf, the mountaineer, the pioneer who goes out and makes it on their own, or even the cowboy who rides off into the sunset alone. And he said it just doesn't work. He said, what he finds is that within Indian society, because our Asian society, where guru culture is part of their psyche, that guru culture actually makes people stronger. It gives them confidence. It gives them a sense of connection that they may not have. What he says tends to happen in Western society is Western practitioners will go to an ashram, hide in an ashram, and become weaker. They will become less independent. They will become less confident, and they will become much more codependent on the teacher and the teachings. I found that those, two descriptions, along with, I should just say before I go into like talking as a group, and then you had Ram Dass, who, taught for many, many years, passed away just recently in America, and had a different experience with a guru. He totally took on the Eastern idea and philosophy and identity, and he really felt like that the guru was the only way to kind of find enlightenment, even within Western society. He had a whole different take on it. And at the same time, you had even people who claimed that Ram Dass was kind of setting up a cult in the West, that he had become kind of a cult head. And so there was even within somebody who is a deeply profound, respected teacher in America because of his academic accomplishments, he still was seen as somebody who was selling something that didn't really work. And now, I haven't really put out my opinion about like what I feel about gurus. I've put out contrasting ideas about how it could work, how it cannot work. And in reality, I kind of really want you guys to tell or to speak and share what maybe any ideas that you have or insights that you have personally or feelings that you have, because I think that's one of the things that's always missing about this conversation. You always have people who have had gurus or are part of Guru Cloak, and then everybody else is kind of shut out because it does become kind of a cloistered society. So, Christopher, how are you today?
I'm fine. How you doing?
I'm good.
I wasn't thinking of saying this right now, but I have a contrasting experience with the guru idea. So every morning, and before most things that I do of any importance, I use Sat Gurunath Maharaj Ki Jaya. Victory to the Guru within.
Yes.
And studied with someone who taught that God exists within you as you.
As you.
And you should worship God within you as you.
Yes.
That has made me stronger.
Yes.
And I don't actually consider myself a follower of a guru, yet the particular individual that I'm thinking about, I can hear the voice in my head chanting the mantra.
Yeah.
And that was, let me see, I'm 75. That was 45, 50 years ago. So, like I say, I have a different experience with it. I think that part of the problems that we're seeing right now in this country with the COVID-19 response on the part of the public is part of this cult of the individual.
Yes.
And we're not going to listen to anything from anybody. Matter of fact, the more expertise they have, the less we're going to listen.
Less respect we have for them.
Absolutely. And it's very problematic. And then conversely, the opposite is also true, that the one person that a lot of people are listening to is someone that I have no respect for, and I wouldn't follow him around the corner to go to the toilet.
Right.
It's baffling. It's very paradoxical. It's very paradoxical. I don't worry about it and I don't fret about it. I go my own way. And my understanding of the guru's function, the guru is a function. It's not a person.
It's a function.
It can be thought of as a process that leads you from darkness to light. And it can come from anywhere. I can remember one time walking down the street and I was talking to someone about some obscure topic of music theory. And right alongside me was what appeared to be a homeless man, disheveled, and he turned around and he gave me a discourse on 12-tone music. I was stunned. And then he walked away. That is the guru. Not the person, the process, the function. So that's just my take on gurudom. I have no problem about worshiping anybody. I mean, there are people that I admire greatly. In music, Miles Davis or Bach. And probably, if I could think about it, some world leaders of some kind or another that I think, have contributed positive things and have taught some lessons. But this idea of a person, now, and conversely, the person that I had the most experience with was considered to be an enlightened guru.
Mm-hmm.
A siddha.
Yeah.
Muktananda. And he allegedly had the ability, I shouldn't say allegedly because I went through the experience, of being able to induce a spontaneous state of samadhi in a student so that you would realize that this was real.
Yes.
That this was something real. This wasn't something that anybody was making up. And he insisted it had nothing to do with him. It wasn't him. He was like a battery or a conduit for a particular form of energy. And he could pass it on, but it would go away. And that you had to work on yourself to maintain the fruit of that. I found that to be a very positive teaching and a very positive experience. I never felt like I was a follower or a troll of some kind, though I did understand that there were people around him when I saw them, and I asked him about it, that were real wild-eyed bhaktis.
Yeah.
And could do nothing outside of this context.
Yes.
And one time I had a very short discussion with him during Satsang about that. That I had, some resistance to that kind of behavior. And the question was, is that really necessary? And he said, that's not necessary. You don't even have to be here. You don't even have to be here. You don't have to read this, chant that, or do that or the other thing. Everybody's got their own street that they walk.
Right.
What he would say was, whatever it is, bring it.
Right.
It's grist for the mill.
Yeah.
Because it's all the same thing. And at this point, I will stop. I should mute.
No. Go ahead, Chris. Go ahead and talk, because I was just saying goodbye to Simone. She was saying that she's leaving.
Oh, bye, Simone. I really don't want to go on and on about it. It was a pivotal experience in my life. It remains a pivotal experience in my life.
Yes.
And if there's anything certain I can say about it, is that I do know this certainly, that I experienced something that I had never experienced before, even on drugs, and I use a lot of drugs. Yeah. Hallucinogens. And the closest I could describe this experience to was a very intense psychedelic experience that was totally physical. So that was real. And it's also real that I practiced for a couple of years intensely what he taught and then stopped. Because one day I woke up and I said, and I looked at myself and I was all dressed in white and I had beads and stuff and all kinds of stuff. I said, what the hell are you doing? You know, where's the rhythm? Where's the salsa? You're a Puerto Rican, for Christ's sake. You know?
Puerto Ricans love wearing white.
Yeah, that's a different thing. That's a different thing, you know? It really involves my responsibility to myself and the universe to work on myself. Period.
Right.
However I get that done. And that I was fortunate to have had this experience, and it gave me a nice kick in the pants. That's not the only experience, but it was a good experience. And you move on. Anyway.
I mean, a lot of good things. I'll address. I want to just say something about what you said about, like, you know, waking up one day, seeing the beads, the white, the sadhana that he gave you, and then leaving it behind. You know, Yogeshri, who is the person I follow, and he said one day, he said, there's going to come a point in your practice, he said, where even the sadhana that I give you is not important anymore. That you're going to realize that this has just been a tool, and at that point, when you realize that it's time to move, that you understand it, he said, you won't even be able to finish the sadhana. Which was very interesting, I thought, that he said that and brought that up, because that kind of, one, it conveyed to me that he didn't want to control anybody, that he's actually saying, I'm trying to get you to then go to another point you made, which is, because I spoke very externally about the guru, is that the teacher and the light or the knowledge is within you. That idea of the guru is only a conduit. It's only a way to plug into the wall. And then at a certain point, the battery's charged. And then once the battery's charged, you should be able to let go of the situation. And then when you said that there were a whole group of people who were like so engrossed in the experience of being there that they couldn't move on, is actually a kind of attachment that is not really the point. Because that becomes a very physical attachment. So this is what I love, and I'll say it again, this is what I love about the satsang being done this way, is that in reality, I throw a few ideas out there and you guys fill in the blank. It's like a coloring book, you know, like, you know, I draw, you color it in so beautifully. And then this idea going to the problem of the Western mind, that while Campbell says, oh, this is like really a wonderful thing. And we have to remember that Joseph Campbell, you know, is, he's from a generation that is pre-World War II, you know, born in the Depression, went as a child, goes through the Depression. There's a sense of community within America and going through certain struggles. And he wasn't living in our time, which is a very consumerist, capitalistic, and that the idea of individuality has been sold to us through merchandising to, you know, to actually sell stuff to us. Like, to be, you know, everything's like, to be an individual, you need this Louis Vuitton bag, which is actually right the opposite of individualism. The individual should not need to look like, you know, or follow, you know, Kim Kardashian and keep up with Kim Kardashian. So it's been we've had this now our generation has this very warped sensibility of individualism, Because the individual now is you can't tell me what to do.
Right. That's right. That's right.
And that I would do something really stupid and destructive because you told me to do, and that has never been the idea of individuality, which is why I told the story about, I repeated the story about King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. They go out into the forest as individuals with one common goal, which is to find enlightenment or the Holy Grail. But that's not where we are right now in society.
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Absolutely.
And so, that idea of the individual has become a kind of deconstructionism that leads to destruction.
Yeah. I in studying a little bit of political science years and years ago, came across this whole controversy, which is at the foundation of the discourse in the country about negative and positive freedom.
Yeah.
And what we have come to now is a place that exalts negative freedom,
right,
as it's an abstraction. I am free because I can do anything I want to do, period. It doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter if I hurt myself, I hurt you, I hurt the environment, or whatever the devil it is. It's my decision to do it, and that's all that counts. When the other side of the discourse was positive freedom, you are free to do the things that are good for the commonweal, for all of us. That's what you're free to do. You're not free to be, as my wife likes to say, an asshole.
Right.
That is not the freedom that is conferred upon you by this social contract. But that's what we've come to. We've come to that point where it's okay just to be a schmuck, do whatever. It's because it's me.
So here's a question I have for you. So because you said, and there are some people I wouldn't follow around the corner to go to the bathroom. Now, in this idea, even though we have shunned the concept of the institutionalized idea of guru because of all of the negativity, the Svengali of it all, and the cultishness of it all, and the abusive nature of it all. In talking about this idea where we are in a point of negative freedoms or negative, are we not creating our own gurus?
Absolutely.
Within a system without using the dirty word guru.
And very often they are dark gurus.
They're rugu.
Yeah. It's the reverse.
They're rugus.
and we somehow, some of us, I shouldn't say we, some of us refuse to believe that those sort of powers can be used by individuals for means that are other than positive.
Yeah.
And the culture at this point, the society reeks of it. Reeks of
a kind of cultishness.
It's toxic. It's absolutely toxic.
Cultishness. I think that that's also. This is where I actually think that we as yogis need to not shun, because there's been a lot of political correctness within the yoga world is saying, don't get involved with those guru guys or those old, or those women and all of the bad things they do. Actually, I think this is why America and Americans and practitioners of yoga of the West need to investigate the guru concept and the guru idea honestly, so that they can actually see that within the American system of politics, there are cults that are being created right before your eyes. But if you don't know what a cult looks like, then you don't know you're part of a cult.
Right. Oh yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We have, I really, I need to stop because really I feel like I'm talking too much.
No, no, no. I mean, I think we're good. We're going to go around some more, but it's.
Recently, it has occurred to me that one of the things that's going on here is that likes and dislikes have been confused and conflated with thought.
Yes.
And that because I like something or I don't like something, therefore I think.
Therefore I am. I think I am.
But that's not the case. Thinking is a whole other thing. It's a higher cognitive function. It's a process, almost without conclusions. Yes. The likes and the dislikes are the stuff you carry around in here that need to be examined constantly for the appropriateness to the situation and the relationship. And we're not there. We're not doing that. We're not doing that. It's, you know, those people are lousy and blah, 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 and they don't deserve this. And I'm not going to spend my taxes on getting them health care or getting them education or doing any of that kind of stuff. Or conversely, those people over there are lousy and we should send our boys over there to, you know, just fire them up, you know, and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a kind of, what can I call it? It's a false leadership, if you want to call the guru a leader. Those are gurus preaching their own stuff because it suits them. It puts money in their bank accounts or whatever the devil it is, and it gets them extra privileges, you know. I'm very disturbed by it. I'm really not in a good place about it. So I work on it all the time to not talk too much about it or obsess about it and all that kind of stuff, and keep it focused on my own process and my own values and what am I doing and what am I not doing. But we're in a very toxic place.
Very toxic.
Yeah.
And I agree with everything you said. I think there's so much insight. And I also think that like we are also in a point where we can't, because we are incapable of seeing, of understanding the guru and the difference between the guru and the Svengali.
Yeah. No, yeah.
They're both on the right and the left. You have people who are Svengalis.
Yes, absolutely.
That even and they're all shunning the concept of the guru, but they're looking to be the Svengali.
Absolutely. Sure.
The Svengali lines their pocket. The Svengali gets them followers on even an Instagram account, you know. Sybil.
I'm going to go get myself something.
Okay, we'll be here.
Oh, you're right back.
I've always, and I guess before I started interpretation of it, and it was always negative. There's always people that were always sucked into following somebody and just doing whatever they were told to. I think after starting with yoga and learning a little bit more, I've come into myself as far as learning my values and not being a follower and just learning to live with people, to live with myself, to live, to do the right thing. So I don't follow a guru. I don't think I ever will. That's just not me. But that's always been my interpretation of what a guru was.
Right.
So that's all I have to say.
One of the things I like, I mean, I think that like what you said, that misconception of that it's a cult leader, and you know, and when you get into cult leaders, then you're talking Svengalis.
Yes.
And then the other thing, the reason why I tend to, so there's two kinds of gurus, right? And Ram Dass actually wrote a beautiful short essay about this. There's the gurus that are always around you, which are upa gurus or upward gurus. they're like your mother, your parents, your school teacher, your friend, even the person like Crispo was talking about, the guy who looked to be a homeless guy and gave him a discourse on 12-tone music. They're upward gurus. They're pointing into the right direction, but Ram Dass even points to the fact, and he had found, Nikaroli Baba, and he saw Nikaroli Baba as the Sadguru, the ultimate or the true teacher, because Nikaroli Baba was felt to be a totally enlightened being who had gone beyond the physical world and was unattached to the physical world and knew Sat or truth, and was able to offer Sat or truth or light to our knowledge, however you want to frame those, because this is a very abstract thing that he's able to offer. So we're putting words that help us understand the abstract to it. And he points out, Ram Dass points out that most of us will never ever find a Sadguru. That it just, even Sadguru can call himself Sadguru, but he may not be Sadguru to everybody. And so that's an interesting concept too, that there's always these people around you that kind of help you along. I like to only follow one person, and I think the value in that is that the ideas and the concepts are only being taught from one school. You see what I'm saying? That's something that I kind of have found in my practice that I need, because I think that is a misunderstanding within Western yoga too, that all these schools are the same, but they're actually quite different. So when you kind of find a teacher that resonates with you, you start kind of getting the teachings from a specific school of philosophy, or psychology. And it doesn't mean that the others are invalid, but it does kind of clarify things, at least in my mind. It clarifies a lot of the confusion of some of the teachings. Me too. Do you want to, you don't have a camera, but do you want to say anything? You're probably on your iPhone.
Sure. So it's just interesting. I'm back in my hometown where I grew up, and I ran into an old high school friend yesterday, actually, and we interestingly had this whole conversation about masks and how certain people want to wear masks and certain people don't. And I think it really touches upon this whole idea that we spoke about today about the Western individual versus the group mentality. Like her brother refuses to wear a mask because he feels like his personal rights are being infringed on. And, I never really thought about why I wear a mask, but I don't, like for me, I don't wear a mask for me. I wear a mask for everyone, like it just feels like it's something to do for society as a whole. And I definitely think we are not there. And I think it almost feels like we're stepping away from looking at society as a whole.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. So I don't know. I have to think more about this. I've never looked into, I didn't even know what guru meant until like an hour ago. So I have to definitely think about this a little bit more. The only other thing that came to mind, and this doesn't necessarily relate to this conversation totally, but like, I just remember, like, is yoga itself, like doing yoga, is that more about the individual or is that more about the group? Go ahead. Sorry.
So we have to remember that, yoga is a very broad term. And when we think of hatha yoga, which is what we as Westerners really are attracted to, the physical practice of yoga, is yes, there's something, it's dealing with the gross body, this individual's gross body on a health way, so that one can actually go inward and find that oneness of being. Like the idea that within all things is that spark of divine infinity that connects us all to each other. So the individual like I said with the search for the Holy Grail, the individual goes into the forest with the single goal that everybody has, which is to find the Holy Grail, which brings everybody back to the round table. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
So, but you know, I feel that anytime you you go into a setting to teach Hatha Yoga and it's a group class, it's about the group. If you are practicing your individual practice on your yoga mat at your home, then it's really a solo practice. It's an individual practice. And I think they have to differ. And I think that what we can see in Western yoga, because we get the same kind of thing about the mass of people coming into a yoga class. Like the number of times when I've had to say to a student from maybe a tradition that has more of a Western mindset, like I can do what I want to do because I want to do it right now. I remember one class I was teaching. I had a student who had was living here for a very short time, but she was the granddaughter of a very famous actress, like worldwide famous actress, and she had lived in San Francisco, and she had taken up a practice, rocket yoga, which is one of these kind of practices that in the middle of everything, if you want to do a handstand, you should just do it because it's what you want to do. And we were in the middle of doing back bends, and she went into a handstand, and I walked over and I said, "We are not doing this right now. You need to come out of that." And she apologized, and she was like, I just wanted to do it. I'm like, I know, but this is not that tradition that you're from. We're here as a group, and we need to experience this that we're experiencing in the moment together. And so I feel that while led classes are not quote unquote guru of a hatha class, and like at any individual yoga studio, a guru, that's just so silly. But I do think that when it's a group class, there is this understanding that needs to be the goal of it, that it's a group thing and we're in that together. We're in this experience together, and we're trying to find a higher sense of purpose of being on this yoga mat together. And I think that is an experience that Americans especially need right now, because we have gone so far over into the idea of individuality it's destructive, So yes, it's individual because it's your body and that's the experience you're having. But like I said, if we decide to have that experience in a group setting, it's about the group too, and something shouldn't be disruptive to the group. Like the brother who's not going to wear a mask because it's all about him, instead of it's about not catching something or giving something to grandma.
Right. Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. Yes.
Do you have any other ideas or?
No, I think that's it for right now.
Sam, do you have anything you want to add?
Yes, I remember this. I mean, kind of continuing being able to give and or receive is a communal thing. That's what I arrived at last week. And for me, I remember the very first class I ever took of Yogeshwari, and we moved into the 3 upward bows. And for the first one, she said very distinctly, "I am not going to start counting until everyone is up." And she refused to start counting. And it was like a while before everyone was kind of understanding, oh, it's me that's holding everyone back. And then during this time to have to figure out my practice, given the experiences I've had over the course of these number of months that I've been away from the studio, there's been some profound insights, many failures, some successes. And so it's this complex thing of knowing that it's both an individual experience, this seeking of a guru, and it's a communal experience. And it's yes and yes. There doesn't have to be room for, is it one or the other? And to your point about the times that we're living in, we make these choices, we consume things to the exclusion of consuming other things. Are you Apple or Android? And that says something, that's supposed to say something about you. If you choose one thing, that means you're excluding the other. That's what's automatically assumed. And I think that we see that conversation a lot when one person says, for example, Black Lives Matter, that it somehow excludes any other group or is antithetical to the notion that any and all lives matter too. So we get stuck on this one idea versus another as if they're combating one another, where it can be both. And it's a really complex thing that from my Western experience has been something hard to grapple with. And you've mentioned before that, that Hindu culture, Hindu religion is in and of itself contradictory, which is not what I was taught growing up as a Christian, that there's one God and that's it. And anything to the contrary is false. So there's not room for discourse, or at least there hasn't been room for discourse about people being able to have really complex ideas about what a personal practice is and what a group practice is. And that it's actually really beneficial to have both. And and to the point of consumerism in this culture, I think being a millennial and having access to technology and seeing the Generation Z as well, being able to see what they're doing, there is a paradigm shift happening in consumerist culture. It's happening. The language is there, the ideas are there, and people are starting to explore these very real concepts of you can have these things, but who you are and what you are and what you contribute to society is vastly more important.
Right.
And I'm seeing that happen. It's slow, and it's an uphill battle against people who think otherwise. And it's become a very complex issue that I think a lot of people are struggling with. This concept of guru for me has always been this thing of thinking that I need to find one person that's going to solve my problems, when the reality is I've come in contact with many different people who have given me tools to solve my own problems. And that
you can solve your problems.
Right. And that the guru is not there. I like this point. The guru is not there to be worshipped. The guru is there to teach you, but really what I find a good guru to be is someone who will tell me to turn inward. And, there is a pervasive notion that you're supposed to just blindly follow a guru anywhere. But a good guru will actually give you your own light to lead yourself. And that in and of itself is a communal act. And the implication then is to then do that for others as well. So as a teacher myself, my goal, and I'm a broken record in my classes, I give you tools, but you have to do the work, because that's what my teachers had made me do. Socratic method. I
have to do
I ask you.
And the language in yoga would be, you have to do the sadhana. The guru can give you the sadhana, but you got to do the sadhana. So it's the same words. Yours is a very Western therapeutic way of saying it. The tools, and In yoga, it's like, well, you have to do the sadhana. And that's what Crispa was talking about earlier, that he was doing the work. And then, go ahead.
That was pretty much it.
One of the things I wanted to kind of bring up, and which is very interesting. So last night, I get a magazine. I really like the magazine called Hindu Times, and it's comes out of Hawaii. It's a Shivite ashram that and they have like really interesting articles, but sometimes about yoga, but most of the time about, what's going on in the world of Hinduism. And the Guru Cloak, which is the schools of the Guru, were kind of shut down by the British. Long story short, Sri Sri Ravi Shankar of The Art of Living 15 years ago wanted to start a traditional Guru Cloak that would teach Brahmins the traditional practices that they needed to be priest in a modern world. Now, if you're glazing over, don't glaze over yet. I'm going to get to my point, which I wanted to make with Sam. That on average, a student will go there and live in this environment for up to 7 to 12 years. But in one paragraph, because they were asking the head of the school, they were like, what are the difficult things of running a school with like 500 young boys, teenage, everything from like 6-year-olds all the way up to 18-year-olds. And the guy said, well, what you have to understand about, this ancient way of teaching is that each student may not stay here for 15 years. If you have a 6-year-old that comes in and absorbs the teachings fast enough, he said they'll be in a classroom with a 15-year-old. He said, we will advance them into a more advanced class. Whereas you may have a 15-year-old who's just not getting the Sanskrit, not getting the ritual, or not getting the teachings, and they remain in the beginner classes until they get it. So that's another misconception about the idea of the guru, that everybody becomes such a unit that they actually lose the individual experience. Because what he was actually saying is each individual, even within a system that's called a Guru Cloak or a Guru school, is having a different experience based upon where they are in their road toward this thing called enlightenment or understanding of spirituality. And they may be totally different. It's not based on age. It's not based on where they're from, or, because they have kids from all over the world, actually, not just from India, but, you have people sending their kids from Toronto and from the US to go and experience it. And that I didn't know until last night when I was reading this article, that actually it's not like a rigid Western system that you're a student and you're going through it first grade, second grade, third grade, and you're all doing it together and you get to graduate together. That actually in this guru system, the individual is actually seen more than Western education, and is the person who is advancing is taken note of and moved up accordingly. That was fascinating. And here again, it's that idea that it's the world of this spirituality or this Eastern philosophy is filled with contradictions. It says one thing about the group, but then it recognizes the individual. Nobody ever stops being an individual. It acknowledges the accomplishments and the work that the individual has done. It's not the football team that either we all score a touchdown or nobody scores a touchdown, which is very Western, which is very, so here again, it's a misunderstanding of a tradition that's very complicated and very, and crisscrosses its own self like a spider web, you know. Bobby, I'm going to end with you today.
Hey, I recently listened to a book called Apprentice to a Himalayan Master, and
Good book.
and it's only on Audible, but it tells a story of someone who found his guru master and then got very attached to him. And throughout his whole experience with this master, the master would say, I'm only going to be with you now for 2 weeks, and then you have to go and become a householder, get married, and then I'll let you know when we're going to see each other again. And I think that is very foreign to Westerners, because we always want to know when and why and how. I think leaving things in this vague, I'll let you know.
Don't call us, we'll call you.
Is very difficult. But my experience is, I think most Americans' experience with gurus or teachers is within arts and sports. On one hand, you have someone like a musician or a dancer who studies with a teacher, and the goal of that teacher is to educate and get the student to become really good. In sports, it's a totally different system, because on one hand you have like a tennis player with a coach whose goal is individual, and then you have a sports team like a football team or a basketball team or a baseball team whose goal is the group acting as one unit. But in sports, the goal is not to become good, it's to win.
It's to win. Yeah.
And that's a totally different thing from becoming a good player.
It's funny because, like, you know, my father was a football coach, and I was begrudgingly, had my arm twisted. I was kind of made to play football, which is probably one of the single biggest regrets of my life, I have to say. I know you're not supposed to, as a yogi, regret anything, but I should have just said, I'm not doing this. But I remember, and I wasn't very good at it. I was short. I was not as big as the other guys. I was quick, but I wasn't fast. I wasn't I didn't catch the ball very well. And I remember, like, you know, but my father was a very good football coach, and he actually could train people to win. And he taught at a 1A high school. 1A means it's the smallest number size you can have. And he taught there for 15 years, and 12 out of the 15 years he coached at this 1A high school in Alabama, he took those kids to state championship 12 out of 15 years, which the first 2 years of him coaching, he did not have kids that went to the state championship games. He didn't win the state championship. I think he did that like maybe 2 years out of them, but he was always able to get the kids motivated to believe that they could actually win. But I remember playing, and the hardest thing for me was like, because I wasn't very good, I didn't get to play every game. And every once in a while, there was a game that we lost. And I remember not feeling really bad that we lost. And like, you know, and my father was like, you know, we lost the game. I don't know why you're talking and why you're like, you know, having a kiki over there with the cheerleaders. And I was like, well, I didn't lose the game. I didn't play. And I really meant that. Like, I didn't lose this game. I didn't get out there on the field. But then I also had to realize that the days that I won the game, or they won, that I didn't win the game if I didn't play either. And if there was actually, if I was going to disassociate myself from when they lost, I couldn't associate myself to when they won. And that's also an idea about that is not in this system. That in this system, you're right, you're not winning or losing. Even though it's a team effort, it's always about the individual's gaining of wisdom or knowledge, which is also understood to be a journey that's going to happen over lifetime after lifetime after lifetime. That you'll never, like, you won't finish it up in this lifetime, because if you were able to finish it up in this lifetime, you would be the Sadguru. Because that's who the Sadguru is. The Sadguru is that being who has accomplished everything that needs to be accomplished and is doing nothing but reflecting the Son or God. There's no more desires. There's no more, and they're willing to actually be like the moon, passively reflect that radiant light. So very, very, and I think that like there's a lot to explore here, and in a positive way, especially now that we have, like we've all kind of said, especially with this virus and the political climate of where we are, and the destructiveness of the self-indulgent identification with individuality. It's a place that we should like start to investigate. What does it mean to come together as a group and just see the interconnection of things, that you don't have to give up your personal identity. But even within Western psychology, the ultimate goal is the Holy Grail, that all of the Knights of the Round Table are looking for the same object. And right now that's not happening. Everybody's looking for different objects. They're looking for different things. And it becomes chaotic. It becomes a very chaotic world. Chris?
I think you're absolutely right about people looking for different objects. They believe they're looking for different objects.
Yeah.
There's a language problem that I think stems from a fundamental philosophical divide, if you will, about if I am this, I can't be that. That's one side of it.
Yeah.
And the other side of it is, I am this and I am that.
Right. Yeah.
And in Western thinking, those two concepts have been polarized.
Yeah.
And I think what you're recognizing in a traditional culture, like the Indian culture that you were describing, or in Tai Chi culture in China, is they recognize polarities as always being operative.
Yes.
There is no singularity.
Yeah.
If you see right, that means left is coming.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
After the dark comes the light, that kind of thing. And
yes.
We're not there. We are in a different place. We are, I am this, and that's all I am, that's all I'm gonna be.
And the other is not good.
Not good, definitely not good.
And that's why we're even in a place in yoga where when we say darkness and light, it becomes divisive, and people start to talk about this esoteric concept of trying to bring a contextual language to something that is so incredibly abstract that there are actually no words to describe it.
Yeah.
There's no words to describe it, and so you use, just like Jesus, you use metaphoric terms to try to convey ideas that are actually beyond this world. That's and right now everybody wants to be of this world.
Absolutely.
I am the Louis Vuitton bag.
Yeah. It's a very material kind of identity, you know. It's not I think, therefore I am. It's I have, therefore I am.
Have it. Yeah, and it's like and it's so it's you know, we're and I don't, and I think that, like, you know, there has to be kind of schools of thought and schools of that kind of really are going to try to keep these esoteric ideas alive, so that when the pendulum swings back, there's something to swing back to.
Absolutely, absolutely. I believe that is the function of this as a group behavior. We are holding the space for a certain group of ideas until such time that light allows it to be open and discussed and considered.
And light is nothing more than a physical identification of a term of wisdom,
right,
knowledge, intellect, a kind of, and right now we're not in an intellect kind of world.
No, we're not.
It's all raw emotions.
No, we're not.
It's very raw emotions. And emotions are good, but emotions, at some point, you have to come back to the intellect. You have to come back to the intellect, or you end up being the French Revolution and just burning everything down and cutting everybody's head off.
Right.
And like ending up, and then you end up with Napoleon again, right? It's like, why did you cut their heads off only to, you know, put the guy from Corsica on the throne? All right, it's been really wonderful. I know it was a small group today, but I think that, like, there was so much wisdom and so much, like, really, like I said, I love this whole platform because it's like drawing, you know, telling Bob what we're going to do is just drawing a picture in a coloring book, an outline, a black line on a white sheet of paper, and then all of a sudden you guys paint it in a way that you fill it out, and you fill it out really beautifully. And that's really what the satsang is an exchange of ideas and a dialogue. And it goes back all the way to ancient India. It goes back to, you know, ancient Greece, that, you know, that without an open dialogue, actually you can't have knowledge or wisdom exchanged if it's just from one speaking point. Let's chant Om together, and we will, and you guys will have a beautiful day. So inhale deeply. Om. Have a beautiful day. Do something wonderful, whatever that is.